Broken heart. Imagine raising a son your whole life, only for him to steal your retirement money, sell your house, and dump you in a nursing home. But just when she thought her life was over, fate gave her the biggest surprise. She found her first love after 65 years. Backhand index pointing right. Stay with me, because this story will shock you, break your heart, and inspire you all at once. My son stole every penny of my retirement money, sold the house I had lived in for 40 years, and dumped me in a nursing home as if I was nothing but old trash. I will never forget the day I sat on that hard hospital-style bed, clutching the last photograph of my late husband, my heart burning with betrayal. My world had ended in that single moment. But life has a strange way of playing tricks on us. Because while I thought everything was lost, my home, my dignity, my family, fate brought me face to face with someone I thought I would never see again. My first love, after 65 long years. And when I saw him standing there, with his silver hair and gentle eyes, my heart stopped beating for a moment. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as memories rushed back like a flood I couldn't hold back. How could it be that after all the pain, the lies, and the betrayal, the boy I loved at 16 now stood in front of me as a man at 81? Was this God's way of giving me one last chance at happiness? Before I could gather myself to speak, he smiled. And with that smile, my whole world shifted. But just when I thought hope had returned to my life, something happened that shook me once again. It all began many years ago. Back then, I was just a young woman, working as a schoolteacher in our little town. I married young to a hard-working man named Richard. He wasn't my first love, but he was good to me. He gave me 2 children, a roof over my head, and 40 years of companionship until death took him too soon. After Richard passed, I devoted everything I had to my children, especially my eldest son, Michael. He was the one I trusted with my life. I had worked tirelessly, saving every coin for my retirement, dreaming of traveling a little, maybe even planting a garden in the backyard I had loved for decades. But those dreams slowly faded as I gave and gave, believing that my son would care for me when I grew old. Michael was charming to others, but I knew his weaknesses. He liked money too much. He liked shortcuts in life. And yet I still believed in him. Perhaps that was my greatest mistake. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. First, he asked to borrow small amounts from my savings, promising to return it. Then he convinced me to sign some papers I didn't fully understand at the time. He said it was for insurance purposes, but I later realized it was to gain control of my accounts and even the deed to my home. One chilly afternoon, I came back from a doctor's appointment to find a for sale sign planted right in front of my garden. My garden. The roses I had nurtured for years, the old oak tree that Richard had planted before he died. It was all up for sale. My knees buckled. I felt the world spin. "Michael," I whispered, holding the wooden post of the sign as though it would steady me. "What is this?" He smiled, that same easy smile he had always used to get himself out of trouble. "Mom, it's for the best. You can't take care of this house anymore. You need a place where people can look after you." I shook my head in disbelief. "But this is my home. Your father built this house with his own hands. How could you?" "Don't worry," he said, patting my shoulder as though I was a child. "You'll thank me one day." That night I cried myself to sleep. And in the morning I was taken, against my will, to the nursing home. My son didn't even stay long enough to unpack my things. He just handed the nurse a folder, gave me a stiff hug and left. I never saw him again after that. Days turned into weeks, and I felt my spirit fading. The nursing home was filled with forgotten people. Men and women who once had families, houses, and lives, now reduced to wheelchairs, dull routines, and memories that no one wanted to hear. I would sit by the window each day, staring at the cars that passed by, wondering if one day my son would come back. But he didn't. He had taken my money, sold my house, and abandoned me. It was one of those lonely afternoons when I was sitting outside in the garden of the nursing home that I first saw him. At first I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. An old man, tall but slightly bent with age, was walking slowly across the yard. He had a cane in one hand and a soft smile on his face. But what struck me most were his eyes. Those bright blue eyes that I had once fallen in love with as a 16-year-old girl. "Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling but warm. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. That name, spoken in that familiar tone, pulled me straight back to a summer evening 65 years ago, when he had kissed me under the willow tree by the lake. Daniel, I whispered, tears already clouding my vision. Yes, my Evelyn, he said, his smile widening. It's me. I felt the world collapse and rebuild itself in that moment. But just as hope bloomed inside me, a nurse rushed over, her face pale with worry. She whispered something in his ear, and his smile faded. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite understand, fear perhaps? Before he turned and walked away quickly with her. I was left sitting there, trembling, confused, and desperate to know the truth. What was Daniel hiding from me after all these years? And why did the nurse look so frightened when she saw us together? My hands were still trembling long after Daniel disappeared with the nurse. I sat frozen in that garden chair, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. 65 years of longing, regret, and memories had come crashing into me in a single moment, only to be snatched away before I could even breathe his name properly. Why did the nurse look so pale when she saw us together? Why did Daniel's face fall, as though he was carrying a secret too heavy for him to share? That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in the narrow bed of my nursing home room, clutching the edge of my blanket like a lifeline. My mind replayed his voice over and over. Evelyn. Nobody had called me that with such tenderness in decades. But what if I had imagined it? What if my loneliness had conjured up his face, his voice, his smile? Old people often saw things, didn't they? Maybe I was finally going mad. The next morning, I forced myself into the dining hall. The smell of porridge hung heavy in the air, and the room buzzed with the clinking of spoons against bowls. My eyes scanned the tables nervously, searching for a familiar face. And then I saw him. Daniel sat alone by the window, his cane leaning against the chair, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. He looked smaller in the daylight, his hair whiter than I remembered, but those eyes, those unforgettable eyes, still shone with that same boyish spark. I pushed myself up from the chair, my legs weak but determined, and shuffled toward him. Daniel, I whispered, as if saying his name too loud would make him vanish. He looked up, startled, and for a brief second he smiled. Then his face tightened, and he glanced nervously around the room. Evelyn, he said softly, you shouldn't be here. My breath caught. What do you mean I shouldn't be here? This is the dining hall. Everyone eats here. No, he said, his voice trembling. I mean with me. You shouldn't be seen with me. I frowned. Daniel, it's been 65 years. Do you think I care what people think? We're old now. None of that matters anymore. His hands shook slightly as he set the teacup down. You don't understand. Things are complicated. Complicated. I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. After all these years, don't I deserve to understand? What happened to you, Daniel? Why did you leave me back then? His eyes filled with pain, and I knew I had struck a wound that never healed. He opened his mouth to answer, but just then the same nurse appeared. Her eyes darted from me to him, and she quickly grabbed my arm. Mrs. Evelyn, it's time for your medication, she said firmly, almost dragging me away. I can take it later, I protested, struggling against her grip. I need to talk to him. Please let me talk to him. The nurse's grip tightened, her face stern. No, ma'am. Now. The other residents stared at us as she pulled me toward the hallway. My cheeks burned with humiliation. But deeper than that was the ache of desperation. Why wouldn't they let me speak to him? What were they hiding? Back in my room, I sat on the bed, tears streaming down my face. My mind was a storm of questions. Daniel had been my first love. The one who had promised me forever under the stars when we were just two foolish teenagers. We were supposed to run away together, but one morning he was gone without a word, leaving me heartbroken and lost. And now, after decades apart, fate had brought him back to me. But instead of answers, I found only walls. For days, I tried to catch glimpses of him. In the hallway, in the garden, in the chapel at the far end of the nursing home. Each time he seemed to avoid me, his cane tapping faster against the tiles whenever I drew near. And always, that same nurse lingered close by, like a shadow guarding him. The suspicion grew inside me like a fire. What secret were they hiding? What was Daniel so afraid of? One rainy evening, I made up my mind. I would not be ignored any longer. If Daniel wouldn't tell me the truth, I would find it myself. So after the nurses finished their rounds and the hallway lights dimmed, I slipped out of my room. My hands shook as I clutched the rail along the wall, moving quietly in the dark. The rain tapped against the windows like tiny fingers urging me forward. I knew Daniel's room was down the west wing. I had seen him enter it once when I pretended to be reading in the lounge. My heart pounded as I reached his door. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. The room was dim, lit only by a lamp on the nightstand. And there he was, sitting on the bed, staring at a box in his lap. He looked up, startled, when I entered. "Evelyn," he gasped, quickly trying to shove the box under his blanket. But I had already seen it. A box full of old letters tied with a ribbon. My letters. The very ones I had written him all those years ago. The room spun around me. My knees went weak. He hadn't abandoned me. He had kept every word I ever wrote. But before I could speak, the door burst open. The nurse stormed in, her eyes blazing. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "You need to leave. Now." Daniel's face went pale, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. The nurse grabbed my arm again, but this time I yanked it away. My voice shook as I demanded, "Tell me the truth. Why are you keeping us apart? What are you hiding?" She froze for a moment, her lips pressed tight. Then slowly, she whispered words that made my blood run cold. "Because if you stay near him, you might both be in danger." The word danger echoed in my ears long after the nurse spoke it. My body went cold, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. What kind of danger could two old people like us possibly be in? We were just shadows of who we once were, bones, wrinkles, and fading memories. Yet the way she said it, with her lips pressed tight, and her eyes darting toward Daniel like she feared someone listening, made me realize this wasn't a joke. "Danger?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What do you mean danger? He's just an old man. I'm just an old woman. Who would want to hurt us?" The nurse stiffened, then shook her head quickly. "That's all I can say. You need to keep your distance, Mrs. Evelyn. For your own good." She reached for my arm again, but this time Daniel raised his voice. Firm, strong, almost like the young man I once knew. "Leave her alone, Claire," he said, his blue eyes flashing with anger. "She has every right to know the truth." The nurse, Claire, froze. For a moment, her face twisted with worry. Then she let out a sharp breath and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I turned to Daniel, my knees still shaking. "What is going on? What truth? Daniel, what are you hiding from me?" He closed his eyes for a moment, his hands trembling as they rested on the box of letters. "Evelyn," he whispered, "there are things about my past, about why I left you all those years ago, things that could put you in danger even now." My heart hammered in my chest. 65 years, Daniel. 65 years I lived thinking you didn't love me, that you abandoned me without a word. Don't you dare keep secrets from me now. His eyes filled with pain. Slowly, with shaking hands, he pulled the ribbon loose on the box of letters. "I never stopped loving you," he said softly. "Not for a single day. Every letter you sent me. I read them until the paper tore, until the ink faded. But I couldn't come back for you. Because they wouldn't let me." "Who wouldn't let you?" I asked, my voice almost breaking. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "The people I got involved with when I was young. Dangerous people, Evelyn. I thought I was just running with boys trying to make easy money. But it was more than that. I owed them, and when I tried to leave, they threatened my life. And yours." My breath caught. "So that's why you left. To protect me." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "It was the hardest thing I ever did. Walking away from you was like cutting my own heart out. But if I had stayed, you wouldn't be here today." Tears rolled down my cheeks. All these years, I had hated him in silence, burying my love deep inside because I believed he had betrayed me. And now he was telling me the opposite, that leaving was his way of saving me. Before I could speak, the door creaked open again. Claire peeked inside, her face pale and nervous. "Mr. Daniel," she said in a hushed voice, "you need to keep quiet." If the wrong person hears about your past, it could stir up trouble again. They still have eyes everywhere. After all this time? I asked, stunned. They're still watching? Claire nodded gravely. Some debts never die. The air in the room grew heavy. My skin prickled as if invisible eyes were already on us. I looked at Daniel. And for the first time, I saw not just the man I loved but also the shadow of the danger that had haunted him for a lifetime. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind was torn in two. Part of me wanted to cling to Daniel, to finally embrace the love I thought I had lost forever. But another part whispered that maybe the nurse was right. Maybe being near him meant inviting danger back into my life. The next day, I made a choice. I would confront Daniel properly, away from the nurses, away from anyone who could interrupt us. I needed the whole truth. So during the afternoon activity hour when most residents were gathered in the lounge for bingo, I slipped quietly into the garden, knowing Daniel often went there to sit by the fountain. And there he was. His cane rested beside him, his shoulders slumped, his hands folded over his lap. He looked up when he heard my steps, and for a moment his face lit with that same boyish smile. "Evelyn," he said softly. I sat beside him, my hands clenched together. "Daniel, I don't care about danger. I don't care about the past. I just want the truth. All of it." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine as if weighing whether I could bear the burden of what he carried. Then he leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Evelyn, what if I told you that the men I once ran with, they're still alive? That some of them are here, even in this very nursing home?" My stomach dropped. The garden seemed to spin around me. "What are you saying?" Before he could answer, a loud crash rang out from the hallway behind us. We both turned in shock. One of the nurses screamed. Residents shuffled in panic. And then through the chaos, I saw him. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a face so scarred it looked like a map of violence. His eyes locked on Daniel with a fury that chilled me to the bone. He pointed straight at him and growled, Well, if it isn't Danny boy. After all these years." My blood turned to ice. The scarred man's voice thundered through the garden, and it felt like the air itself grew heavier. Daniel froze beside me, his hands clutching the edge of the bench so tightly his knuckles turned white. I had never seen that look on his face before, pure fear. My chest tightened. This wasn't just an old grudge or some ghost of the past. This was real. This man wasn't here by accident. "Danny boy," the stranger repeated, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "Didn't think I'd find you here, huh? Thought you could hide in a place full of old bones and forget the past." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice trembling but steady enough to carry. "Frank, I thought you were dead." The scarred man, Frank, let out a low, bitter laugh. "Dead? Oh no, Danny. Men like me don't die so easy. But you," his eyes flicked to me, and my blood went cold. "You've been living the sweet life, I see. Got yourself a little lady friend too." I felt Daniel's hand reach for mine, gripping it so tight I could feel the desperation in his bones. "Leave her out of this, Frank," he said firmly. "She has nothing to do with our past." Frank took a slow step forward, the gravel crunching beneath his heavy shoes. "Everyone connected to you has something to do with it. You ran away, Danny. You left us to burn while you saved your own skin. You owe a debt, and I'm here to collect." My throat went dry. This wasn't just about old memories, it was about revenge, and I was suddenly standing right in the middle of it. "Frank, listen to me," Daniel pleaded. "It's been 65 years. I'm an old man now. What good will hurting me do? Haven't we all suffered enough?" Frank's scar twisted as his smile widened. "You don't get it, do you? Time doesn't erase betrayal. And debts don't expire." Just then Claire, the nurse who had been shadowing Daniel, came running into the garden. Her face turned white when she saw Frank. "You shouldn't be here," she shouted, her voice shaking. "Frank, leave him alone. If the supervisor finds out you're stirring trouble again, you'll be thrown out of here for good." Again? The word rang in my ears like a warning bell. This wasn't the first time Frank had caused trouble here. Frank sneered. "The supervisor can't touch me. Nobody here knows who I really am. Isn't that right, Claire?" Claire's eyes darted nervously between him and Daniel. My heart pounded as realization sank in. She knew him. She had been protecting Daniel, not because she was bossy or cruel, but because she had been trying to keep Frank at bay all along. Daniel rose slowly to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane but standing tall all the same. If you want to settle something, Frank, you settle it with me. Not her. Not anyone else. Me. For a moment, time froze. The three of us stood in the garden, the air thick with fear and tension. The other residents had been ushered away, and it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then Frank lunged. "Daniel!" I screamed, clutching his arm. But before Frank could reach him, Claire stepped between them. She held out her hands, her voice desperate. "Stop. If you fight here, you'll ruin everything. Please, Frank, listen. There's another way." Frank hesitated, his chest heaving, his eyes flickering with rage. Finally, he spat on the ground. "Fine. Not here. Not now. But this isn't over, Danny boy. Not by a long shot." He turned and stormed back into the building, his heavy footsteps echoing like thunder. The moment he was gone, Daniel collapsed onto the bench, gasping for breath. I held his trembling hands, my own body shaking with fear. "Evelyn," he whispered hoarsely, "you should stay away from me. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. And I can't." His voice broke. "I can't let him hurt you." Claire crouched beside us, her face tight with worry. "You both need to be careful. Frank has been circling Daniel for months now. I've done my best to keep him away, but he's dangerous. And now that he's seen you together, Evelyn, you're a target too." The garden felt colder than winter. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out every sound around me. For 65 years, I had dreamed of finding Daniel again, of rekindling what we lost. And now that I had, I was staring straight into a nightmare I never expected. I looked into Daniel's weary eyes and whispered, "Then we face it together. Whatever it is. I won't lose you again." He squeezed my hand, tears glistening in his eyes. For the first time in decades, our hearts beat as one again. Only now we were bound not just by love, but by the shadow of danger that had followed him into his old age. And then, just as I thought the worst had passed for the night, Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face turning pale as ash. She looked at us, her voice trembling. "He's not acting alone. Someone else is here. Someone even worse." Claire's words hung in the air like a blade suspended above our heads. "He's not acting alone." My breath caught in my throat. I gripped Daniel's arm so tightly that my fingernails dug into his skin. "What do you mean, Claire? Who else is here?" Claire swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she tucked her phone into her pocket. Frank was never the mastermind. He always had someone pulling the strings. If he's here, that means the other one can't be far behind. Daniel's face turned ashen. "No, it can't be him." "Who?" I demanded, my heart pounding. Daniel looked away. His eyes clouded with old terror. "His name was Victor. Back then he was the one we all feared, even Frank. Cold, calculating, cruel. If Victor is here," he trailed off, his voice cracking. Claire nodded gravely. "Then none of us are safe." The garden suddenly felt smaller, darker, as though shadows were creeping in from every corner. A part of me wanted to run, to hide in my room and never come out. But another part, the part that had lived through years of grief and betrayal, refused to let fear control me. "Then tell me what we do," I said firmly, though my voice shook. "Because I won't leave Daniel. Not again. If there's danger, I face it too." Daniel's hand tightened around mine, his eyes glistening with both love and regret. "Evelyn, you don't understand what kind of man Victor is. He doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. He'll use anyone and anything to get what he wants." "And what does he want?" I whispered. Daniel let out a shuddering breath. "Revenge. And money. Always money. 65 years ago, I walked away with something that wasn't mine. Something they've been hunting me for ever since." Claire looked sharply at him. "You never told me that part." Daniel's shoulders slumped, as though the weight of his secret was finally too much to bear. "I didn't just run from them. I took a share of the money we made, blood money, from robberies and deals I never wanted to be part of. I told myself I'd give it back, but I never did. Instead, I buried it. I tried to build a new life." My heart raced. "So you're saying after all these years, they're still looking for that money?" Daniel nodded slowly. And now that Frank has found me, Victor won't be far behind. He'll want it, and he'll want me dead. The night seemed to press in closer, the air thick with the promise of danger. Just then the garden lights flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed us whole. I clutched Daniel's arm, my pulse hammering. From the silence came a low, chilling laugh. A voice deep and calm drifted out of the shadows. Well, well, look what we have here. The runaway, his little nurse, and the woman who stole his heart. Daniel went rigid beside me. His whisper was barely audible. Victor. I turned toward the sound, my body shaking so hard I could barely stand. Out of the darkness stepped a tall man in a long coat, his hair white as snow but his eyes sharp and cruel. He carried himself with power, like someone who had never once lost control of his life. You owe me, Danny boy, Victor said softly, almost kindly. And debts, as you know, don't die with age. He took a step closer, his eyes landing on me. And who's this? Evelyn, is it? I've heard of you. The girl he left behind. How poetic that you're reunited now. Just in time to share his fate. Daniel stood, his cane shaking in his grip, but his voice rang with defiance. Leave her out of this, Victor. You want me, fine. But if you touch her, I swear. Victor raised a hand, silencing him. Oh, I'll decide who gets touched, Danny. And don't you forget. I've waited 65 years for this. The garden felt like a trap closing in around us. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. Victor, this is madness. You'll destroy everything you've built by doing this here. Victor's smile widened, cold and cruel. Everything I've built? My dear, you underestimate me. This, he gestured to the nursing home walls around us, is nothing but a cover. And now that I've found him, the real game begins. And before anyone could react, Victor reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He waved it in the air. The map, he said, his voice dripping with triumph. The one to where you buried my money, Daniel. Did you really think I wouldn't find it? Daniel's face turned pale as death. The paper in Victor's hand trembled slightly in the night air, though his smile never faltered. Daniel's lips parted in shock, his voice barely a whisper. That's impossible. The map was destroyed. I burned it myself. Victor chuckled darkly, the sound making my skin crawl. Oh, Danny boy, you should know better. Nothing stays hidden forever. You might have burned one copy, but I had another. And now at last the treasure hunt ends. Treasure. The word echoed in my ears, almost absurd in this place full of wheelchairs and medication carts. And yet, the terror in Daniel's eyes told me it was very real. Victor, Daniel pleaded, taking a shaky step forward. Listen to me. That money is cursed. It destroyed us once already. If you dig it up again, it'll destroy us all. Victor's eyes flashed. Money doesn't destroy, Danny. Weakness does. And you were always the weak one. I could hardly breathe. My mind raced with questions. If Daniel had really hidden stolen money all those years ago, where was it? And what would Victor do once he had it? Victor tucked the paper back into his coat, his voice sharp now. Tomorrow. At dawn. You're coming with me, Danny. You'll take me to the money. If you don't. His gaze slid to me, his smile curling into something cruel. She pays the price. Daniel's hand tightened around mine, his entire body trembling. Don't you dare touch her, he growled, his old voice breaking with desperation. Victor only laughed. You always were sentimental. And with that, he turned and strode back into the building, his long coat sweeping behind him like the wings of a crow. Frank followed close at his side, sneering at us before disappearing into the shadows. The garden fell silent again, but the silence was worse than the noise. It was the silence of doom hanging over us. Daniel sank back onto the bench, his head in his hands. It's over, Evelyn. He's found me. He's found the map. Tomorrow morning it ends. Claire crouched beside him, her voice urgent. No. It's not over. We can do something. We can warn the supervisor, call the police. No. Daniel cut her off, his eyes blazing with sudden fire. You don't understand, Claire. Victor has friends everywhere. The police, the staff, maybe even the supervisors. If we try to stop him that way, we'll only make it worse. I knelt beside him, gripping his frail hands. Then what do we do, Daniel? Tell me. I won't let him take you. Not after I've just found you again. He looked at me, his eyes full of love and sorrow. Evelyn, you shouldn't have to suffer because of my mistakes. Tomorrow I'll go with him. I'll give him what he wants. If that saves you, then so be it. My chest tightened with rage. After everything, after losing him once, after finding him again, I was not going to sit back and let him throw himself to the wolves. No, I said firmly, my voice stronger than I thought possible. You won't face this alone. If Victor wants to dig up the past, then we'll be ready for him. Claire's eyes met mine, filled with both fear and determination. She's right, Daniel. If we work together, maybe we can outsmart him. He thinks he's in control, but we still have something he doesn't. Daniel frowned. And what's that? Claire glanced at me, then back at him. Hope. And nothing is more dangerous to a man like Victor than people who refuse to give up. For a moment, silence settled between us. Then Daniel reached for my hand again, his grip trembling but steady. Then tomorrow we fight. Together. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the three of us sat in that garden, knowing that the next day would decide everything. Our past, our future, and whether love could truly survive even the darkest shadows of time. But what none of us knew was that Victor's plan was far more twisted than we imagined. And when the sun rose, he wasn't just coming for money. He was coming for blood. The night after Richard's proposal, I couldn't sleep. My heart was racing, not with fear like before, but with a strange mix of joy and worry. I sat by the window of the nursing home, staring at the stars, thinking of everything that had happened. My son Michael had abandoned me, stripped me of everything I had worked for, and left me here like I was nothing. Yet fate had brought Richard back into my life after 65 long years. The following morning, Richard came early with a smile brighter than the sun. He held a single red rose in his hand, just like he did when we were teenagers. Margaret, he said softly, let's leave this place. You don't belong here anymore. My heart skipped. Leave? But where would I go? With me, he replied firmly. I bought a small cottage near the lake. It's peaceful, quiet, and waiting for you. Tears filled my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt like someone truly wanted me. Not for my money, not for what I could give, but just for me. The plan was simple. Richard had spoken to the director of the nursing home and arranged everything legally. By the end of that week, I was free. Free from the smell of disinfectant, the constant crying of lonely residents, and the cold hallways that echoed my sorrow. Walking into Richard's cottage was like stepping back into a dream. The walls were painted warm cream with family pictures, bookshelves, and the smell of baked bread filling the air. He had prepared a room just for me, decorated with wildflowers. We spent the next days talking, laughing, and sharing stories of the years we lost. Sometimes I would cry thinking about Michael, how greed had blinded him. Richard would gently hold my hands and say, Margaret, God has a way of turning pain into blessings. You lost what you thought was everything, only to gain what you never imagined. But just as peace settled into my life, a storm came knocking. One afternoon, Richard and I were walking back from the market when a black car pulled up beside us. The window rolled down and there he was, Michael. His face was full of anger and shock. Mother, he shouted, what are you doing here? I froze, trembling. Richard stepped in front of me protectively. Michael got out of the car and walked toward me. I heard rumors you left the nursing home. How dare you live happily while I'm drowning in debt because of you? He spat, his voice full of venom. I stared at him, hardly believing this was the boy I once rocked to sleep in my arms. Michael, I whispered, you stole from me, abandoned me, and now you dare to blame me? His eyes narrowed. You're my mother. Everything you have belongs to me. Don't think you can run away with this old man and live happily ever after. I'll make sure you regret it. Richard pulled me closer. Leave, Michael, he said sternly. You've done enough harm. If you try anything, you'll answer to me. Michael's fists tightened. This isn't over, he hissed before storming back into his car and speeding away. I stood there shaking, my heart torn between fear and sadness. The boy I gave life to had turned into my biggest nightmare. But Richard's arms around me gave me strength. We'll face him together, Margaret, he whispered. That night, I lay awake again, knowing the battle wasn't over. Michael was going to come back. And this time, it would be worse. The piece I had found was suddenly hanging by a thin thread. And then, something happened that shook my soul once more. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Richard and I were sitting by the lake outside the cottage, sipping tea and enjoying the fresh breeze. For the first time in years, I felt alive. I thought maybe, just maybe, happiness had finally returned to me. Then, out of nowhere, the sound of screeching tires broke the peace. A car raced down the gravel road toward us. It was Michael again. He slammed the door open and stormed out, his face wild with rage. You think you can just forget me? He shouted. You think you can live happily while I suffer? Michael, please, I begged, stepping forward. You're still my son. Stop this madness before it destroys you completely. But he didn't listen. He pulled out a piece of paper, a fake will he had drawn up, claiming I had signed everything over to him. This proves everything is mine, he screamed. Richard stepped forward calmly. That's a lie. And you know it. Michael lunged toward me, trying to snatch my handbag where I kept my ID and remaining documents. But before he could reach me, Richard blocked him. The two struggled, voices echoing across the lake. Stop, I cried, tears streaming down my face. You're fighting your own mother's last chance at peace. Then suddenly Michael slipped. He lost his balance near the edge of the lake. Richard grabbed his arm just in time to keep him from falling into the deep water. For a moment, everything froze. The angry son, the protective man, and me, a mother torn between love and betrayal. Michael looked into Richard's eyes, then into mine. His anger slowly cracked, and for the first time in years, I saw the broken little boy hiding inside the man. He broke down crying. I'm sorry, mother, he sobbed. I was blinded by greed. I thought money was everything, but I lost myself. I rushed to him and hugged him tightly, tears flooding my eyes. Michael, I forgive you. But you must change. Life is too short for hate and greed. Richard pulled us both up from the edge. The three of us stood there, broken yet alive. That day, something changed in Michael. He agreed to return the little he had left of my retirement money and swore to start anew. I didn't know if he would keep his word, but I prayed he would. As for me, I realized something important. Money can be stolen, houses can be sold, but true love, whether it's the love of a parent or the love of a soulmate, can never be destroyed. Richard and I eventually married in a small ceremony by the lake. Surrounded by flowers and the sound of nature, I walked down the path with joy in my heart. My past was filled with pain, but my future was now filled with hope. And when I looked at Michael standing quietly at the back of the crowd, I knew he still had a long way to go. But I also knew forgiveness was the only path forward. In the end, I lost everything I thought mattered but found everything that truly mattered. Because sometimes, life's cruelest betrayals lead us straight into the arms of our greatest blessings. Life lesson: never put your trust in money alone. It fades, it can be stolen, and it can blind hearts. What truly matters is love, forgiveness, and the courage to start again. In the end, she lost everything she thought mattered, but gained everything that truly mattered: love, forgiveness, and a second chance at happiness. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll away. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next powerful grandma story.